everybody, and welcome back to the JW Marriott here in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona for the SMACNA annual convention. I have the pleasure and honor to be joined by Dr. Anirban Basu, SMACNA's chief economist. Dr. Basu, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, and I love being SMACNA's chief economist. It's a source of enormous pride for our business back home in Baltimore.
Well, we're lucky, and despite the fact we have disagreeing opinions on tight ends, it's our pleasure and our honor to have you joining our family. So, Dr. Basu, can you just kind of summarize right now the economic climate facing contractors right now?
It's an interesting mix or a brew of things that are happening that seem almost contradictory. On the one hand, contractors are extremely busy. Their number one challenge by and large is finding enough workers and holding on to those workers who are skilled enough to do the job well, to not create issues with client satisfaction, that kind of thing. They seem to have pricing power. They expect to expand going forward. Most contractors will tell you that I expect to expand my sales, my employment, even my profit margins over the next 6 months or so. There's lots of strength there. At the same time, we have these countervailing forces. Obviously, we've got lots of geopolitics taking place, lots of labor market strife, and then much higher interest rates. And that makes, of course, project financing sketchier, more difficult, and makes it more likely that projects will not move forward at some point in the future. But for right now, the industry's managed through these much higher borrowing costs. Lots of projects have been financed, and contractors are busy. And some will tell you they're too busy. They have more work than they know what to do with. They're turning away work because they can't find enough people and enough capacity to get the work done.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm really glad you touched on the workforce issue because that's a common item of feedback we've received from SMACNA. What do you think contractors can do to kind of adapt to kind of those workforce issues right now?
So the younger workforce seems to be very different from older members of the workforce. Older members of the workforce seem to be very motivated by money. If you paid them more, they'd show up more. They'd work on weekends, 4 a.m., whatever it happened to be. They were very thankful for their jobs, so on and so forth. Younger people seem to want to be paid, everyone does, but also want more flexibility. And of course, contractors can often offer that kind of flexibility. The work has to get done, and there are certain times of the day often that contractors can work on a project. They can't work other times because people are sleeping or whatever it happens to be, permit issues, whatever it happens to be. And so this is very challenging. So what can contractors do? Try to offer as much flexibility as possible, try to offer social missions. So in many cases, these young people want to work for an enterprise that has a broader social mission. It could be strengthening America through infrastructure investment. It could be making America safer. It could be making our air cleaner, whatever it happens to be. But to emphasize the fact that we're doing very important work at SMACNA, the members are doing very important work, making the world a better place, a cleaner place, a safer place, a more efficient place, and to emphasize that part of the social mission as they try to recruit and retain those younger workers in particular.
And I'm glad, also early in your remarks, I'm glad you touched on the fact about the geopolitical tensions because I don't know about anybody else here, but I just have visions of what happened a couple years ago with the Ever Given in the Suez Canal and the world supply chain was just sent into a spiral. How will those geopolitical tensions and just kind of the uneasiness across the world, how can that impact contractors?
How can we know? The world is fraught with risk. I mean, as we're talking right now, of course, we have this burgeoning situation in Israel involving Hamas and maybe Hezbollah and the Iranians, and we just don't know. As it turns out, President Biden right now is in Israel. As we're speaking, we've got, of course, those North Koreans who lob missiles everywhere, once in a while as tests and so on. So we've got the Russia-Ukraine situation. All kinds of things are happening. Back home, we've got the southern border issues and other kinds of issues, and of course, a presidential election in 2024. Lots of uncertainty out there, domestically and internationally. How will that affect things? My guess is the world is so fraught with risk that something is going to break. Is it that oil prices are going to take off to $150 a barrel? Right now they're on $90 a barrel. I don't know. But it feels like a really tense world right now that something could explode at any moment. And I'm worried about those black swan risks, those black swan events, low probability events. As it turns out, there are black swans in nature. They're low probability, but they exist. A black swan event is an event that is of significant magnitude, such that it affects financial markets and broader economies. 9/11 is a classic black swan event, so is COVID. What black swan events are in front of us? It seems that there's many possibilities.
And going back kind of the post-COVID reality, inflation is something that's kind of hit us all, and whether in large macro ways or micro ways, how do you think inflation is going to play out over the kind of the course of the next year?
I still think inflation will remain stubbornly high. Now it's come down from its peak. The supply chain effects are not nearly as serious as they once were, let's say late 2021, early 2022. So inflation has gone from more than 9% according to the Consumer Price Index to less than 4%. Mentioned that in my presentation recently to the SMACNA membership. However, it's still higher than normal. It's higher than we're accustomed to. And inflation is a rate of price change. So prices are still rising off an already lofty base. And people are paying very high prices, and those prices keep going higher. And so this is putting a lot of pressure on businesses, including small businesses, and also on households. And eventually, again, one would think that something is going to break, that consumers cannot deal with these high prices forever. So far, they've navigated them.
Yeah.
But at some point, one would think this has got to end.
And you talked about the fact, and it was good news. The fact there's almost too much work for our folks. What kind of work is out there? Like, what kind of work is really dominating the marketplace, and what kind of demand is there? What specific areas do people want things built or retrofitted? Where is that demand looking right now?
Yeah, I've learned relatively late in my career that construction activity is not so much driven by economic growth, that's a factor, but by economic transformation. And that's what we see right now. We have growth, but even more so we have transformation. So we have artificial intelligence and the effect of that on data center construction. We have the e-commerce economy and the burgeoning of that and what that means for fulfillment center construction. We have reshoring of supply chains back to the United States and what that means for construction manufacturing facilities. We're trying to rebuild our nation's infrastructure, just passed a major infrastructure package in November of 2021. A lot of that money is yet to be spent. Most of it has yet to be spent. And so you put all those things together, all that transformation, that leads to a lot of construction volume. At the same time, we don't have enough workers to deliver all those services. So it's high-priced construction. It's hard to get projects done. But it's a very busy time for contractors. The environment is replete with opportunity. And so that's where we are right now. And I would think that for right now, for the next few months at least, if not the next year or two, you're going to see lots of momentum in some of these segments. Healthcare is another segment that stands to be quite strong, given the demographics of our country.
Exactly. So there's kind of I don't know, call it a bad word, dark cloud or whatever you want to call it. That word is recession. Where do you think we stand with that right now?
Well, look, as I pointed out to the audience, I'm a pessimist by nature.
That's okay.
A lot of that had to do with girlfriend dynamics in high school and college, or lack thereof, as it turns out. But there are other reasons. Okay. But the point is this, that I think recession is coming. A lot of other economists don't. Because what they see is that, look, interest rates have gone up, the economy is powered through that, the consumer is still spending, we're still adding lots of jobs. And the economy has gotten used to operating at these higher rates of borrowing. My view is different. My view is that eventually these higher borrowing costs, this Federal Reserve policymaking with respect to monetary policy is going to eventually catch up to this economy, that Americans can't keep spending this way, businesses can't keep spending this way, can't keep hiring this way, and eventually we find our way into recession at some point in the next 12 months. That's my forecast. Here's the thing, I've been saying that for many months, and the economy, if anything, has gotten stronger during the third quarter.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I am humbled. But if we talk about the R word, I still think that there's a risk out there, even as other economists have actually dropped their recession forecast.
Well, it's one of those things that's hard to tell. This is not, the atmosphere feels almost ripe for a recession, but to your point, the economy keeps, the jobs numbers keep just surprising. Every time you hear jobs report, it's like, oh, like this is unprecedented. Like the numbers are high, and it's just like, I feel like we're just in a time where it's just unpredictable, maybe in a good way, maybe not in a good way. You're the expert. I'm most certainly not an economist, but it just feels like this economy keeps defying expectations for reasons that I definitely don't know about.
It's very kind of you to call me an expert, but I got to tell you, the way the economy's worked out, in defiance of my expectations, I don't feel like an expert. But I still am asked to generate for various audiences my expectations, and I just think, based on history, sometimes it takes a while for these things to play out. But the consumer is increasingly indebted.
Yes.
I think more and more employers are concerned about the possibility of recession. I actually hear certain contractors say they're worried about the lack of project financing, again, developer-driven activities.
Yes.
They are worried about demand for their services. Not immediately, they have lengthy backlog right now, but at some point in 2024 or 2025, they say, maybe things will be worse. And of course, they're always worried about things like materials prices, whether it's oil prices or natural gas prices or concrete prices. Again, lots of risk out there, but thus far, the economy and its various economic actors have navigated these risks pretty amazingly. And I am, again, humbled by how well the economy has performed relative to my expectation. I'm a forecaster. I should have seen this coming, I suppose. I didn't. That said, I'm still pessimistic for the future. I'm pointing out again, I was pessimistic in the past, and things didn't work out the way I expected.
And I think that level of caution is kind of appreciated. I think it's just a matter of, it's hope for the best, expect the worst, and just if we navigate the middle, that's maybe good for everybody involved. So with that in mind, I think the biggest part is, what if you had to give a word of advice for a SMACNA contractor going into 2024, going into 2025, what would you say?
Don't be complacent. So, I mean, this is the kind of economic environment in which people could become complacent. Say, look,
Absolutely.
the economists have been talking about recession. It didn't come. We're as busy as heck. We have lengthy backlog. I can keep spending. I can pay my workers bonuses. I can do all kinds of things. I can, buy my special someone a $1.5 million house, whatever it happens to be,
Yeah.
which is actually exactly what we saw before the housing market crash of 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, is that a lot of construction firms said, hey, on the residential side,
Yes.
things are working out so well, homes never lose value, we're going to be busy forever, this is the time to take some money out of the business. And it was the wrong time to do it. They needed that money back in the business when the downturn came, and it wasn't there anymore. So I would say, look, a lot of segments are going to continue to perform economically, even if we enter a recession. But be cautious with cash flow. Set aside more cash in reserves right now and think about workforce. Lots of people have been hired by contractors over the last couple of years, 400,000 plus people since February of 2020, if you look at the overall construction industry. Undoubtedly, there's some bad hires there. Some superstars, but some bad hires. Think about who needs to be part of the team. Are you managing people or are you managing around people? If you're managing around people and it's making it more difficult for you to do what you do as a contractor, maybe it's time to let somebody go and generate cash flow that way, or maybe replace them with someone better. Whatever, not a time for complacency. It's not a time for the status quo. It's a time to embrace the risk and to deal with it aggressively. And so that would be my single piece of advice.
And that's excellent. I think contractors will appreciate that. And I actually have no doubt a lot of them will follow that, and that will definitely benefit their business, both in the short and long term. Dr. Basu, thank you for joining us here, and we're looking forward to a great relationship moving forward as our chief economist. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks very much. I'm also looking forward to it as well.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.